August 19, 1944. German Army Headquarters, East Prussia. General Alfred Jodl sat at his desk, studying the newest reports from the falling Western Front. His officers had done the math on the Allied supply lines that now stretched over 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to General Patton's fast-moving Third Army. They believed the Americans had gone too far ahead. Patton would soon have to stop, maybe in a few days, maybe even hours, because no army could move that fast without running out of fuel. From Hitler's Wolf's Lair base, Jodl thought the same thing every German general knew from experience. One tank division used around 150,000 gallons of fuel a day while advancing. The Americans were now 400 miles from their fuel bases. The math made it clear. Patton's army would soon stop moving, giving the Germans time to gather again near the Seine River and maybe hold out until winter. But what Jodl didn't know was that 125 miles away, nearly 6,000 trucks were already racing east, lights on through the night, carrying more than 12,000 tons of supplies every day. It was called the Red Ball Express, a supply operation so bold that German planners never imagined it could exist. It was about to destroy everything they thought they knew about modern warfare. In just 3 days, Patton's tanks, thought to be stuck, would smash through German defenses at the Seine. Within a week, Paris would be free. Within a month, American troops would reach the German border. The German army's best minds were about to learn a powerful lesson about American logistics, taught by 23,000 truck drivers, most of them African-American, who turned a one-way road system into the fastest, most effective supply line in military history. The German officers' trust in American failure came from years of training and what they had seen in battle. The German army had invented blitzkrieg. The German army had changed the way modern war was fought. They mastered the mix of tanks, planes, and infantry, but they also knew how dangerous supply problems could be. Many of their own victories had slowed or failed because their supplies couldn't keep up with their troops. In Russia, their attack had first broken down not from Soviet strength, but because they simply couldn't deliver fuel, food, or ammo across such huge distances. German trucks wore out on the rough Russian roads. Most of their army still relied on horses, about 80% of their transport, which could never move as fast as their tanks. The railways didn't match the Russian system, so supplies sat far from the front lines. General Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would soon lead the 47th Panzer Corps, had written in July, "The Americans face the same problem we had in Russia. Their machines make them strong, but they also make them weak. Engines need fuel, ammo, and parts. They've moved 400 miles in 30 days. History shows what happens next. Everything stops. German intelligence tracked how fast the Americans used supplies. A Sherman tank burned about half a mile's worth of fuel per gallon on roads, and even more off-road. An infantry division needed 700 tons of supplies each day. A tank division needed 1,000 tons. Patton had 12 divisions moving across a 60-mile front. That meant 12,000 tons every day, traveling 400 miles from the beaches on broken roads through a network the Germans had already wrecked while retreating. General Siegfried Westphal, who would soon serve as Chief of Staff under Field Marshal von Rundstedt, wrote on August 20th, "Even if the Americans had endless trucks, which they don't, and perfect roads, which they don't, and no breakdowns, which is impossible, they still couldn't keep Patton moving for more than 2 days. Nature's laws can't be broken, not even by American factories." But 5 days later, at 2 in the afternoon on August 25th, inside a borrowed French mansion near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Ayres from the Motor Transport Service spoke to a room of doubtful officers. The numbers looked terrible. Patton's Third Army was burning through supplies faster than any army ever had, moving so quickly that no normal system of trains, planned convoys, or depots could possibly keep up. The supply system was breaking down under the heavy load, so Colonel Ayres stood up and said, "Gentlemen, we are going to build a one-way road from Cherbourg and the beaches all the way to the front. Every truck will run 20 hours a day, stopping only for fuel or real trouble. We will move at least 12,500 tons every day." The name Red Ball came from the railroad, where a Red Ball train meant top priority. No delays, no excuses. The Red Ball Express would follow that rule. 2-1. Way roads 1 going forward with loaded trucks. one coming back with empty ones, running day and night with headlights on. No blackout rules, no stopping except for gas or breakdowns. Trucks would move 5 minutes apart, keeping 35 miles an hour. Repair teams every 50 miles. Military police checking and removing any slow trucks. Colonel Charles Thrasher checked the plan and said, "We need 140 truck companies. Almost 6,000 trucks working at 90% and ready. That's impossible by any rule of supply." But in just a day and a half, the impossible was working. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 3916 Truck Company started their big GMC Deuce and a half trucks full of shells for Patton's guns, 300 miles east. Most of the Red Ball Express drivers were African American, about 75% of the 23,000 men they were serving in a still divided army. And though many could not eat in white cafes or use white restrooms back home, they were the ones keeping the famous white general's army moving. The drivers made their own spirit fast, painting words on their trucks, like Patton's Blood Bank or Hitler. "Here we come," or "Detroit to Berlin Express." They made their own road rules. Slow, trucks pulled off the road. Broken ones were pushed away. Anything under 20 miles an hour was called a roadblock. By August 28th, German scouts watching from hills sent back shocking reports: endless lines of trucks, lights shining for 20 kilometers with no brakes, no blackout. The German scouts counted about 1,000 trucks passing every hour. They said the Americans had dropped all caution. German army rules said lights at night meant disaster because enemy planes could spot them easily. Long lines of trucks meant easy targets for bombs or artillery. One stop truck could block the whole road. But the Americans didn't care, they just kept moving. General Edgar Feuchtinger, who led the 21st Panzer Division, watched the Red Ball express himself on August 30th. Hiding nearby, he sent a worried report to Army Group B saying the enemy runs a supply system. "We can't even understand. Trucks go by every 30 seconds. Day and night, they don't hide, they don't spread out, they don't follow any rule. We know this isn't military science, it's factory production turned into war." What the Germans couldn't grasp was that the Americans played by totally different rules. German soldiers tried to stay hidden. The Americans trusted speed and numbers. Germans tried to save every truck. The Americans planned for about 20% to break down and kept going. Germans followed the book. Americans made things up as they went. The Red Ball Express hit numbers the Germans thought were impossible during its first week. From August 25th to 31st, it carried almost 90,000 tons of supplies, about 12,800 tons a day. The trucks traveled nearly 700 miles each round trip. Almost 6,000 trucks made around 1.5 trips each day. The convoy itself used about 300,000 gallons of fuel. German officers later found these reports and called them fake, but they were all true and still growing. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express ran like a machine. Convoys left every 5 minutes from the starting point in the west. Each group had about 67 trucks carrying 5 tons each, sometimes 7 tons if overloaded. The trip one way, about 350 miles, took 14 hours, with just 2 hours to unload and turn around. Trucks never stopped. They were always in motion. 5,000 trucks were always on the road at the same time. The Red Ball Express kept inventing new ways to fix problems. Every hour, drivers and mechanics handled issues German experts thought were impossible. Around 1,800 trucks broke down each day, but mobile repair teams fixed them right on the roadside. They had a 15-minute rule: fix it fast or push it away. They took parts from trucks that couldn't be saved. Engines were replaced in under an hour using small cranes. When the main Red Ball route got jammed, drivers made new paths. They used French buses to move soldiers, so more trucks could carry supplies. They even used captured German vehicles, painted them army green, and sent them back out. They built new roads around broken bridges, piling rubble from bombed towns to make roadbeds. The Germans watched this messy but working system and couldn't believe it. Their army trained for perfect plans and detailed schedules. The Americans ignored all that, but somehow got faster. The biggest shock came from how they handled fuel. The Red Ball Express used 300,000 gallons of gas every day just to run itself, more than whole German armies received. Yet it never ran dry. The Americans had built something called Operation Pluto, a network of pipes under the English Channel, sending fuel straight from Britain to France. By September 1944, Gas was flowing under the sea, and German spies had no clue. Along the Red Ball route, fuel dumps were set up every 25 miles. Tankers ran beside the convoys, so no truck waited more than 10 minutes to refuel. German General Walter Warlimont looked at aerial photos and said, "The Americans have fuel stores bigger than all our reserves. They use more fuel moving fuel than we give to tank divisions. This isn't war, it's industry gone wild." The Red Ball Express didn't just keep Patton moving, it made him faster. German planners said tanks could move maybe 20 or 30 miles a day if everything went perfect. But Patton's army, powered by the Red Ball Express, covered 40 to 60 miles every day for weeks on September 1st, 1944. The 4th Armored Division alone advanced 35 miles just in the morning. The 4th Armored Division stopped at noon to refuel. Red Ball Express trucks were already there waiting with gas and shells. They filled up fast and moved another 32 miles that afternoon. This 67-mile advance in one day broke all German defense plans, which had counted on a limit of 30 miles a day. General Heinz Guderian in East Prussia read the reports and refused to believe them. He said no tank army can move 60 miles a day for a week. Machines would break down. This must be propaganda or a mistake, but German radio teams caught American messages proving it was true. Even worse, the Americans were sending their positions without any secret codes, so sure they could outrun any German move. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had full reports on the Red Ball Express, and the results terrified their planners. Every idea they had about American power was now wrong. The report said Americans waste vehicles leaving broken trucks instead of fixing them. Drivers stayed awake for days on strong pills, breaking all rules of rest and safety. No camouflage at all. So easy to bomb, yet no German planes ever hit them. 30% of trucks broke daily, but there were always more to replace them, fuel used that would destroy any European army, but still they never ran out. Field Marshal Walter Model read the report and said, "If this is true, we are fighting not a stronger army, but a stronger nation. They don't hide because they don't fear us. They waste because they have endless supplies. We can't beat that with tactics." While German leaders struggled to understand the Red Ball, drivers were paying a heavy price. They drove for 72 hours straight, seeing things from exhaustion and the drugs meant to keep them awake. Accidents killed 300 men. During the Red Ball's run, trucks crashed in fog, rolled over on wrecked roads, or caught fire from hot engines. But their spirits stayed high. Most were African American soldiers who didn't yet have equal rights back home. But they knew they were part of something that mattered. They were proving Hitler's racist beliefs wrong. Mile after mile, ton after ton, when German officer Hans von Lueck was captured. That September, he told his interrogators, "We knew we were finished when we saw your supply system. You broke every rule they wasted. Fuel left trucks behind, drove until they dropped, yet still won by sheer numbers. You have turned war into an industry beyond anything we can understand." That's what captured German officers said. The effect on German troops was crushing. They lay in their trenches, hearing American engines all night, a constant roar of trucks that never stopped. They had only 3 bullets each, while the Americans brought millions. The sound alone became a weapon. It broke their will. Trucks amazed German engineers too. The GMC 2.5-ton truck, the heart of the Red Ball Express, was a masterpiece of mass production. General Motors built over 500,000 of them, more than all German trucks combined. Each one had all-wheel drive as normal, not special automatic air for the tires waterproofing, so it could drive through deep water engines that ran even on bad gas heaters, that worked in winter, and they were simple to fix. Americans didn't rebuild engines, they swapped them. They didn't save every part they threw away. What broke, they didn't depend on one expert mechanic. They had thousands of good ones who could fix almost everything. As the front pushed east, the Red Ball Express changed routes overnight. The Germans took weeks to plan such things. The Americans just painted new signs and started moving. When the line to Chartres got too crowded, they made new routes. Red Ball extensions called White Ball, from Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond from Cherbourg, to rail points Red Lion from Bayeux to Brussels, and ABC from Antwerp to Charleroi. All working within 2 days of planning. The Germans couldn't believe it. The speed defied their entire system. The fact that most Red Ball Express drivers were African American made it even harder for Nazi thinkers to accept their own ideas. said black men couldn't handle machines or think for themselves. Yet these same men were running the greatest supply system in history, and they knew exactly what that meant. They understood the bitter irony. They knew what the Nazis thought of them, and that made them push even harder. Every mile they drove proved Hitler wrong. They fought racism not with guns but with truck keys. They crushed Nazi lies just by doing their jobs. Some German prisoners, forced to load Red Ball trucks, were shocked. They worked beside African American sergeants who figured weight loads faster than German engineers who spoke English better than their own teachers, and who treated prisoners kindly. Despite all the hate Nazi propaganda had spread, the Red Ball Express needed roads, bridges, and depots that Germans said couldn't be built during battle. But American engineers did it anyway. They built or fixed 40 bridges, made 15 big fuel depots, set up 26 repair stations, and built 8 small cities for the drivers. All while trucks kept rolling. The bridge at Monte was blown up by German troops to stop supplies. They said it would take 6 weeks to replace Americans. Built a new one in 14 hours. The Red Ball convoys lost only 8 miles on quick dirt roads pushed through by bulldozers. German engineers watching couldn't believe it. No long meetings, no piles of blueprints, just fast action. They built faster than Germans could destroy things. It looked like whole roads and towns appeared overnight in French fields. One thing shocked German artillery most: the Americans' endless ammunition supply. Their gunners fired freely like they had no limit. When the forts at Metz were attacked in September 1944, American artillery fired 100,000 shells in one day, and the Red Ball still brought 20% more. The German guns firing back had only 50 shells each per day. The difference was crushing. American guns thundered for hours while German officers counted and realized that took 50 truckloads of shells every single hour. The Red Ball delivered it nonstop. The Red Ball Express wore out trucks faster than any army could handle. By late September, machines were breaking down everywhere, and an average truck lasted only 10,000 miles instead of 30,000. Each day, about 30% were too damaged to drive. 500 engines were replaced every week. 10,000 tires were used weekly. More than 5,000 trucks were lost or abandoned. But the convoys never stopped. American factories had planned for this. Ships kept landing in France every week, full of brand new trucks. New drivers were trained in just 2 days and sent right onto the road. German reports showed Americans were losing more trucks each week than the entire German army had left in France. Yet their supply lines kept growing. They had done what Germans thought impossible, moving supplies faster than they used them. French civilians living near the Red Ball route saw American plenty after years of German shortage, and it amazed them. Drivers, especially African Americans, often broke the rules to share food and candy with French kids. Every stop brought smiling children, and the drivers gave them chocolate cigarettes and soap. It was a shocking difference from the German occupiers who took everything away. German intelligence noted the effect. French people now believed the Americans could not lose. They pointed to the endless trucks as proof. Resistance groups grew 4 times larger along the Red Ball path. People who once obeyed the Germans now fought against them. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express hit its hardest test. Patton's Third Army had driven so far that even this massive supply chain started to strain. Round trips stretched over 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing, trucks were falling apart, and German scouts saw the trouble. General der Panzertruppe Hans von Mantel reported. On September 8th, American supply lines are failing. Convoys now come every 15 minutes instead of 5. They drive slower. This is our chance. But once again, the Americans adapted. In just 72 hours. They built transfer points halfway along the route, cutting each trip to 350 miles. They set up a driver rotation plan, built repair bases closer to the front, and doubled the number of trucks. By September 12th, supply deliveries had actually grown. Instead of stopping what should have been a crisis, made the Red Ball Express stronger and faster to support it. Americans added something else that Germans believed impossible: large-scale air supply, C-47. Planes started dropping critical cargo straight to the front. Each plane carried about 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, German scouts saw 900 flights in one day carrying 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe had only managed 300 tons a day at Stalingrad, and that was its best effort. Americans used planes like flying trucks. They didn't care about losing, some because they always had more. Germans couldn't match those numbers. The Red Ball Express also broke every German rule of command. Junior officers made choices that only generals could make. In the German army, sergeants ran operations bigger than what German colonels handled. The lack of strict control shocked German observers, but somehow this freedom made things faster and smoother. Not chaotic, while the German system was too slow, by October 1944, new rail lines were ready. So the Red Ball's workload started to ease. What was meant to last just 10 days had kept going for 82, delivering over 112,000 tons of supplies across 122 million ton miles. German commanders, now fighting near their own homeland, finally understood. Field Marshal Model wrote in his report, "We were not beaten mainly by American tanks or planes. We were beaten by American trucks." The Red Ball Express had shown that in modern war, logistics is strategy. Even the shift to railroads was astonishing. American engineers rebuilt 1,000 miles of destroyed French track. While the Red Ball was still running, they laid new rails faster than Germans could wreck them, even using captured German trains. The final numbers of the Red Ball Express stunned everyone: 82 days of nonstop work, 412,193 tons, delivered 222 million ton miles, nearly 6,000 trucks on average, and up to 7,000 at peak. 23,000 drivers in total, 700,000 gallons of fuel burned every single day. 40,000 tons of ammunition moved just for Patton. 15 million rations carried, 135,000 tons of medical supplies. When German officers later studied these numbers in prison, they admitted they had badly underestimated America. They had guessed America could do maybe 3 times better than Europe, but the truth was 10 times that much beyond the sheer tons and miles. The Red Ball Express broke Germany's belief in its own military power. German officers who once mocked Americans as soft now watched them perform miracles through willpower. And endless machines, captured soldiers stood behind fences, in silence, counting Red Ball trucks. Some cried because they finally understood this wasn't just about supplies. It meant Americans could waste more than Germans could even make. They were watching their whole worldview fall apart, one truck after another. The Red Ball Express also forced the American Army to face its own racism. The operation relied mostly on African American soldiers, still kept separate, denied fair treatment in combat roles. When General Eisenhower visited in September 1944, he saw the truth himself. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, wrote that the general watched black drivers who had been going for 20 hours straight and said, "These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to rethink many things." That moment helped push the Army toward desegregation. 3 years later, black soldiers had proved in France what they always knew: give them the tools and a chance, and they would match anyone. The Red Ball was their battle, and they won it completely. German racial experts couldn't explain it. AS journals stopped talking about American logistics because the truth was too obvious to deny. German military engineers studied the Red Ball Express deeply after the war, and its lessons changed how armies thought about supply forevermore. Volume beats inefficiency, backup machines erase weakness, decentralization makes speed, standard parts increase power, and human limits are higher than most believe. General Franz Halder, who once led the German General Staff, wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved that logistics shapes strategy, not the other way around." Americans knew it. We learned too late. Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers, countless acts of heroism amazed the Germans. These are true stories from military records. Corporal John L. Houston drove for 48 hours straight, delivering ammo to the 2nd Armored Division at Cambrai, falling asleep 3 times but kept going and after other drivers woke him up. Private Booker T. Washington's truck caught fire from hot brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of leaving it, he drove 2 miles to a field hospital, jumping out just as the cab went up in flames. The supplies saved wounded soldiers on both sides. Thousands of similar stories showed German observers what American military culture meant. Initiative, taking risks, and completing the mission mattered more than rules. Desperately, the Germans tried to copy the Red Ball Express in late 1944 during Operation Griffin in the Battle of the Bulge. They used captured American trucks to supply their troops, but it failed instantly. German drivers couldn't keep up. German mechanics couldn't fix the trucks fast enough. German fuel wasn't enough. And most importantly, the Germans didn't have the American attitude of endless resources. The officer in charge said, "We captured 50 American trucks within a week, 30 were deadlined. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them. That difference explains our defeat. The winter of 1944 to 45 was the Red Ball Express's biggest test. Freezing rain. Snow and ice should have stopped trucks. German doctrine said, wheeled transport is impossible below -10 degrees Celsius yet. The Red Ball kept going. Drivers put chains on tires, poured alcohol in radiators, and drove on speeds, dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour. But deliveries never stopped. German scouts saw ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that had stopped panzer divisions. Americans had built a supply system that worked in any weather, on any road under fire. It wasn't neat or efficient by German rules, but it was unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were ordered to study the Red Ball Express for history. Their conclusions were the same, and shocking to German pride. General Friedrich Schultz said, "The Red Ball Express showed a kind of warfare. We never imagined Americans built a temporary civilization. Thousands of men, thousands of trucks, millions of tons of supplies, as all just to keep the army moving." Armies then disappeared. When no longer needed, Americans created temporary systems in days that were better than what we built over years. The smartest observation came from General, our Hegerian father of German tank warfare. We invented blitzkrieg, but never solved its main problem. Logistics. Americans solved it with industrial power. We thought impossible. The Red Ball Express was not just a supply line, it was a river of material that overwhelmed our forces. The Red Ball Express cost the United States about $100 million in 1944 for destroyed trucks, fuel use, damaged roads, and French claims. German officers used to managing shortages couldn't believe it yet. Americans thought it was cheap. The operation helped capture 400,000 German soldiers, freed France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by about 6 months. Each day of war cost America $150 million. So the Red Ball Express paid for itself in a single day. Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, who led European logistics, said we wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France in any past war. That would be a disaster. But with American industry, it was acceptable. The Red Ball Express also changed civilian logistics after the war. Thousands of drivers returned home with experience running the largest transport network in the world. They started trucking companies, designed interstate highways, and built modern American logistics companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways. These veterans learned in France that moving lots fast beats perfect planning, and keeping trucks rolling 24 hours a day can move the world. Military historians everywhere. Military historians see the Red Ball Express as the key supply operation in Europe. Without it, Patton would have stopped, Paris would have fallen weeks later, and German troops could have built winter defenses. The operation proved American doctrine that logistics matter more than tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield moves, Americans studied Detroit factories and railroad schedules. The Red Ball Express showed that modern warfare is won by who can supply their troops best, not just by clever maneuvers. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerhard von Rundert, the top German commander in the West, got full reports on the Red Ball Express. He studied them for hours, then called his staff and said, "Gentlemen, we face something beyond military solution. The Americans made a supply system that ignores distance. Our plan assumed they would reach a point where advancing forces outrun their supplies. That point doesn't exist. They have changed war, and we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, Obus Hans Bedell, suggested hitting the Red Ball routes with the Luftwaffe. Von Rundert understood completely and said, "With what? 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we can't, they'll be replaced in a week. We need to destroy 200 trucks daily to keep up. We don't even have 200 planes behind." The numbers were human stories that amazed German observers. Drivers who hadn't slept for 3 days, refusing relief so their trucks could keep going. Mechanics in freezing rain, keeping convoys moving. Teenagers lying about their age to drive trucks. These stories multiplied and created a legend that broke German morale. Americans were not soft as propaganda claimed. They worked harder than Germans drove horses, but did it voluntarily. This made them more dangerous than German doctrine expected. The Red Ball Express became unplanned propaganda. German soldiers heard the trucks at night. Endless motors that never stopped. The sound itself was psychological warfare. German units said they heard ghost convoys that demoralized them as much as real ones. Knowing Americans had endless supplies, while they rationed bullets caused despair. American psychological warfare teams noticed the effect. Americans even used psychological tactics. They broadcast truck engine sounds toward German lines. When no convoys were there, German units reported these phantom trucks as real, showing how much the Red Ball Express had shaken them in November 1944, with rail lines partly repaired. The Red Ball Express officially ended, but its methods changed military logistics forever. The idea of constant high-volume supply, even if wasteful, became American military doctrine. The final innovation was how fast it disappeared. 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, hundreds of installations, all gone in 72 hours. Troops reassigned trucks, redistributed routes returned to civilian use. Germans needed months to set up smaller operations and years to take them down. Americans built what they needed, used it, threw it away, and built something better when German generals surrendered in May 1945. Many specifically mentioned the Red Ball Express, showing the futility of continued resistance. General der Panzertruppe Hasse von Mantutel said at interrogation, "When we saw your logistics, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Ball Express was a weapon we couldn't fight." Field Marshal Albert Kessler, one of Germany's best commanders, was asked what surprised him most about American forces. His answer: "Not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express proved you had turned your entire society's production into a weapon. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers." The final stats of the Red Ball Express prove American industrial warfare. Total cargo delivered 412,193 tons. Total distance, 122 million ton miles. Trucks used 5,958 daily. Average 7,000 peak drivers. 23,000 operating days. 82 fuel used 57 million gallons. Tires worn 180,000 vehicles destroyed over 5,000 cost $100 million. German divisions defeated because of supply 47 estimated war days shortened 180. These numbers tell a story bigger than just military success. The Red Ball Express shows the moment when war changed forever, when industry mattered more than clever tactics, when logistics decided strategy, instead of just supporting it. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service issued a stamp honoring the Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. The ceremony recognized an operation often overshadowed by combat, but just as important for Allied victory veterans. There spoke of their pride in proving that American industry and individual determination could overcome anything they had driven through. Exhaustion, through broken trucks, through weather that stopped tanks. Most of them black soldiers still segregated and discriminated against. Yet they delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is not support. It is the main effort. It showed that industrial democracy could use resources on a scale that totalitarian efficiency could not. German generals who had laughed at American supply were silenced by 6,000 trucks moving 12,500 tons a day across 700 miles of liberated France. They had assumed Americans would act like Europeans, conserve resources, and advance slowly. Instead, Americans created a logistics flood that overwhelmed German forces. The success came not from military genius, but from American traits. Germans never understood industrial power, mechanical skill, quick improvisation, and above all, individual initiative. Where in the Wehrmacht field, marshals would have to approve decisions, American soldiers acted independently. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army benefited most, wrote the ultimate tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for defeating Germany as any combat unit they drove through. Exhaustion through broken trucks, through weather that stopped tanks without them. The Third Army wouldn't have moved without movement. We wouldn't have won. They were mostly black soldiers, segregated, discriminated against, and denied recognition. But they won the war just as surely as any rifleman. History must remember this truth. That truth is the final testament to the Red Ball Express. 23,000 mostly African-American drivers operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory achieved what German military science said was impossible. They supplied advancing armies faster than physics should allow, kept up a pace beyond human endurance, and proved that in modern war, the side with the most trucks beats the side with the best tactics. The German generals had laughed at American logistics, calling it wasteful, undisciplined, and impossible to sustain. 82 days later, those same generals surrendered to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express, finally realizing that American trucks defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance overwhelmed military skill, that logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact echoed through military history. It proved that in the industrial age, victory goes not to the bravest soldiers or smartest generals, but to the nation that can deliver the most supplies fastest and farthest. The German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender papers in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who changed warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves a place among the greatest military operations. Not because it was elegant or efficient, it was neither, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton moving, kept the Germans retreating, and proved that in modern war, a convoy of trucks matters more than a column of tanks. The highways of France still bear the marks of this achievement, scars of the Red Ball Express ruts worn by overloaded trucks, bridges quickly fixed roadsides full of abandoned vehicles. But the greatest monument to the operation is how fast the Allies won. Every day, the war shortened, saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who laughed at American logistics learned the hardest lesson of modern war. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America speaking very loudly in the roar of 6,000 engines that never stopped carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour down a one-way road to victory. The last word belongs to a German officer whose name is lost to history, quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration, standing beside a road in Belgium, watching the endless convoy of American trucks. The officer said in accented English to his captives, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him every 5 minutes, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare. One delivery at a time, the Red Ball Express turned logistics into strategy, supply, into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. The German generals stopped laughing when they understood this truth. But by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history.